one of the interesting things about aviation today is it's incredibly safe. You know, it's ridiculously safe. So, you know, one of my colleagues here likes to quote the statistic: if you go out, based on our current accident rates, if you were to go out and take a flight once a day, every day, you would have to live 35,000 years before statistically you'd be in a fatal commercial aircraft accident. Okay, so it's incredibly safe. Now, the way we've made aviation as safe as it is it's been a consistent effort to resolve every problem that we know about. The traditional way we've improved safety is we look at accident data. Whenever we have an accident, there's a very careful investigation of what the cause of the accident was. And we, once we identify cause, particularly if we identify a pattern that's occurring, then we attempt to mitigate that cause. Okay? And we've been very successful at that. I was involved in work on wind shear accidents. There were a number of wind shear accidents. We actually have basically taken the wind shear accidents down to nothing. Controlled flight into terrain, where you take a perfectly good airplane and the crew loses situation awareness. We've actually fixed that with some of these systems like the terrain awareness warning system. So we're so safe now that it's actually difficult to identify what we could do to improve safety, because there's so many possible things you could do. It's hard to know what the right one is. So one of the trend in the industry is to shift from reactive safety programs where you react to an accident to predictive safety programs where we try to predict where the emerging problems are. We're enabled in this by the fact that there's an incredible amount of data now that's available on airplanes. One source of data that everybody knows about is the what's called the black box, okay, or the digital flight data recorder. So a modern airplane actually records typically 200 to 1,000 parameters at different frequencies, but some often several times a second, of everything that's happening on the airplane. Plus there's outside data like radar data and things like that. One of the things we've been doing is looking at how you look at this digital flight data, recorder data. This is typically pulled on every flight, so we have records of every flight to try to identify things that are starting to happen in the system that are problems. So the difficulty is that airplanes are operated in so many different ways, it's hard to determine what's, quote, normal. So we've developed a technique of anomaly, what we call anomaly detection. So a way to identify flights that are not normal to be looked at by experts to figure out if there's a problem. Now, we already do this today using what we call exceedance detection. So if we know that there's a particular speed you shouldn't go faster than, there's a trigger set that says, okay, this airplane went faster than it was supposed to, you should go, or slower, you should go look at it. But the operations are so complex, we're looking for more latent things. So the way this works is that we look at all the parameters of interest, okay, and which can be hundreds of parameters, and they can be, again, sampled, let's say, once a second. So let's just say we have 80 parameters, and we're going to look at them for 100 seconds, okay? So, what that gives you is, is 8,000, sort of different sampling points, okay? And you might have 20,000 flights you want to look at. So you have a lot of data to look at. What we do is we do a high dimensional clustering technique. The way this works is that essentially, if you have a reference time, let's just say takeoff, what you do is every parameter of interest, airspeed, altitude, control position, throttle setting, etc., okay, has a value, and it has a value at every time from the reference time. So all those becomes vectors in a very high dimensional space, like an 8,000 dimensional space, and what you look for is clusters in that space. So all of the normal flights will go into a cluster, okay? If you have a flight that's abnormal, it will be outside the cluster. So this clustering technique allows you to sort of, without knowing anything ahead of time, just look at all of the 20,000 flights and look for flights that are unusual compared to the 20,000 flights. We've tested this, we've developed some techniques, and these are fairly standard data mining techniques. We've applied them to digital flight data recorder data and have been very successful at identifying anomalous flights that weren't caught in the normal screening. So this actually has some significant promise as a way to monitor activity right now in post-flight analysis, but could possibly be useful in in-flight analysis to identify problems. Most airlines today monitor their flights on a daily basis through what's called flight operations quality assurance programs. What we're hoping to do is develop better methods to allow them to more precisely identify flights that should be looked at to determine if something unusual is going on. So let me give you an example. Let's say that there's a change in an air traffic control procedure at some airport in the world. And something about that procedure makes it difficult for the pilots to stabilize their airspeed or things like that. Now the pilots might mention it or whatever, but they might not even be aware of it. You might be able to find this problem, okay, go back and say we're seeing a pattern of unstable flights at this particular airport, then go identify what's going on in the air traffic control procedure that's creating the instability. So, or with this shifting of new airplanes or perhaps issues of crew training. Let's say there was a crew training problem where the pilots were not understanding or misinterpreting something. They were going out in the field and actually flying and doing something incorrectly at certain times. That we hope would show up through a technique like this. So it's a way to do sort of a continuous quality assurance process in a very complex environment that's difficult to sort of monitor for normal operations.